This is a podcast that seeks justice. Justice for the lives stolen by those in society that hide amongst us every day. Hidden in our towns, cities, and countrysides, the places that we work, and sometimes in our very own homes. This is Hidden Killers.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm Tony Bruschi. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to press subscribe wherever you download podcasts so you don't miss any of our discussions on the cases that we are following for you right here. On this edition of the program, we are talking about the Bryan Kohberger case and the Idaho murders with Louis Goodman, former deputy district attorney and experienced Alameda County criminal defense lawyer. I want to get your insight onto this case as a criminal defense lawyer and former deputy district attorney. There's a lot that goes on in these cases that attorneys and defense lawyers, they see. They know what's going on. There's certain procedures that happen, and it's not surprising to you guys on the inside because you see these things every single day. It's part of your job. But to the general public, sometimes we're surprised. Sometimes the media is surprised. It's not exactly what everyone expects to get, and the general public doesn't really get it. Can you speak to what's going on right now with the Kohberger case in terms of the arraignments, entries of pleas, continuances, discovery motions, responses, all those things that are going on right now in the discovery in the case of Bryan Kohberger?
In any serious case where you have essentially a life top on this case, I mean, it's, I don't, I'm not sure exactly whether there's any sort of death penalty involved here, but I don't think that that has come up. But, certainly Kohberger faces the rest of his life in prison. Mm-hmm. And if I were his attorney, what I would be saying to him is that there is no rush to do anything. There's an enormous amount of time involved with this case. You could end up spending the rest of your life in prison. Be patient. And as the attorney, I would be dragging my feet on this as much as possible. The last thing I want is a quick preliminary hearing. The last thing I want is some sort of a quick trial. I want to put this thing off. Why? Well, things happen. And witnesses disappear. People die. People don't remember. Evidence gets lost. Procedural problems come up. The police officers who were involved end up getting indicted. I mean, who knows, and I'm obviously not speaking specifically to this case. Sure. But things happen over time. And in a case like this, where you have so much public emotion around it, and obviously the very personal and private emotion of the families of the victims, you don't want to go into a public forum like a courtroom quickly. You want to take your time.
On that same point, taking your time, you're exactly right. All those sort of things can happen, which can dramatically change the outcome of a case as far as what's available and who's available and how that will all play out in court. But could it also go the other way? Information getting leaked out, more pieces of evidence and such being discovered, or just information about his character coming out, which could also then taint an already very small jury pool. For example, we just learned in the last 24 hours of his employment at the college campus in Pullman, where he was an assistant professor, being fired for his behavior, for allegedly sexual angst against women, grading them differently, comments made against them, all very much playing into this character that has already been painted into the public of this woman-hating, know-all narcissist that pulled off this crime somewhat or very successfully. Could all of that also work against him the longer it takes to get to court?
Well, I would take issue with saying that it was done very successfully because he ended up leaving a trail of evidence with his DNA and his cell phone and all the rest of it that makes a circumstantial case against him.
Sure. Well, I guess what really I mean by that is strong. What I mean by that is that they're dead. Is that he successfully killed who he was targeting.
Yes. In that sense, yes. Those are questions that are going to be taken up again as a motive. Just like we were talking about in the other case, those kinds of issues are going to come in terms of motive, and I think that there will undoubtedly be some evidence that will come in about Mr. Kohberger's social issues, the fact that he really didn't get along with people very well, that he didn't have much of a social life, that he, may have been one of these incel type people. So it's difficult to say, but I think that those are the kinds of things that I would be happy as his attorney to take up in motions in limine. In other words, saying to the judge before the trial started, these are things that we should keep out. And then if the judge lets them in, well, then those are a basis for appeal. But I think that the case against Mr. Kohberger is ultimately going to be made with DNA evidence, which you and I have talked about some time ago. And I think that I think that was before he had even been arrested.
Yeah.
You and I talked about, and I said that I thought that the DNA was going to be the thing that would ultimately lead to him. And I think that that's the same thing that will ultimately lead primarily to his conviction. I also think that the games he was playing with his cell phone are not going to impress anybody. And the fact that it's on at a certain point, it's off at a certain point, just happens to be off at the same time the murders take place. I'm not sure that you need to bring in his sort of sociopathic character, although again, motive is going to be an issue. And in this case, the motive to me is very unclear. And I wonder whether at some point there's going to be established some sort of connection between Mr. Kohberger and one or more of these victims, even if it was so much as a meeting up at a party or a bar or some social situation, coffee shop, and then having some sort of obsessive notion about one of these victims going on in his head.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that we still don't have the answer to on that. I believe there had been some reports that he had dined at the restaurant where where two of the girls had worked, the restaurant disputing that, but many others flat out saying, no, this seems to be pretty factual, and other employees of the restaurant had said that as well. With a character like this that was clearly stalking these women, or just happened to be in the areas of this home by cell phone pinging data all this time, how is that going to be defended? I mean, there's so many pieces in this that from the outside looking in look very, very damning. Is this a case that you think will even make it to trial? He has not yet pled either way at this moment, initially saying, I'm looking forward to being, or he's ready to be exonerated. I don't know how exactly this would play out if it does go to trial. Is there even a chance that he could win?
There's always a chance that he could win. I mean, in my view, you and I are old enough to remember the O.J. Simpson case.
Sure.
I think that that's a case where there was very good DNA evidence. There was very good blood evidence. There was very good evidence of the travel from one place to another. And the jury ultimately acquitted O.J. Simpson of that crime, despite the fact that there was a lot of evidence against him. So anybody who tells you that they know what a jury is going to do has not tried very many jury cases.
That's true. I got another one for you. I'm just curious because there's been some buzz about this the last few days. Me personally, I'm just going to say I've been kind of rolling my eyes at it, but I always am surprised by this case and what comes out of where. That would be the reference to possibly him leaving the knife sheath behind as trying to throw people off the path. There was a Marines insignia on it. Maybe he left it to make someone think this was a military individual who committed the crime. Do you think there's any grounds to those sort of theories, or was this just simply a careless mistake made by someone at that moment?
Well, there's also been some discussion of that he perhaps put some things in his garbage can, knowing that the garbage can would be gone through. And I don't know. When you're talking about someone with the mind that Mr. Kohberger has, from what we know from public reports, and obviously that's the only thing that I know of, but this is someone who has a very strange mind. And he may have thought that leaving some sheath behind would somehow make it look like someone else had done it. But generally speaking, those kinds of things don't work very well. I'm reminded of the military case years ago where the defendant, who was a military officer, scrawled "Helter Skelter" all over the walls of the apartment where he and his wife lived in order to make it look like it was some crazy hippies or something that had come in and killed his wife. And, the court managed to see through that pretty quickly.
Sure.
So, my experience has been that ultimately truth is hard to hide, that anything that is of an historical, factual nature ultimately can be figured out. And there's an awful lot of very good forensic people who are good at figuring these things out.
Former Deputy District Attorney and experienced Alameda County criminal defense lawyer Louis Goodman, thank you so much for joining us on the program today and giving us your insight. Always a pleasure to have you. Thank you guys for joining us for this edition. Be sure to press subscribe wherever you download podcasts. You don't miss any of our discussions, breaking updates on the cases that we're following for you. Get a commercial-free version of the program through Apple Podcasts. You can sign up right now and even try it for 3 days free. Go and check that out. You can follow me on Twitter @TonyBPod. I'm Tony Bruschi. For all of us here, thanks for listening.